host Sean Lynn in the pub for a Dram with friends, where we talk about faith, family, food, and fun. Pull up a chair and I'll pour you a drink. Episode 59. We are extremely excited to have Dr. Phil Chavez join us in the pub, where he's going to talk about building a character of a godly man. Welcome to the pub. We are extremely excited to welcome Dr. Phillip Chavez to the pub. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Sean. It's good to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
Well, I was hoping to, as I was driving today in minus 28 Celsius, that maybe some of that warm air from down your way could come up this way. So
yeah, I think here, well, I'm in a little bit colder area of California. You know, it snows in half of California. You do realize that. So
yes, I
not always warm and cozy. So yeah, I think
you've got the north and you've got the mountains as well.
Yes,
so
and the desert too. Yeah.
Oh, the desert gets snow?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
and and you get brutally cold as well. Fierce winds especially. Yeah. That can make everything much more brutal.
So I'm gonna have a little bit of some Baker 7 that the Knights of Columbus at my local, they did a whiskey tasting which I helped organize, and they gave me some of the leftovers. So I'd like to shout out to my local St. Peter's Knights of Columbus and thank them for the Baker 7.
Good deal.
You're a JD guy apparently.
Well, right now I'm sporting some Jim Beam double oak, double barreled.
Ooh, there.
Yeah. So right in hand here. So I'm all ready for you. It's the first time I drank during a show. So we'll see what comes out of this. Could be good. Could be better.
There you go. So for our friends in the pub, who is Dr. Phillip?
Who's Dr. Phillip? Well, that's a big question. You know, I've spent a lot of time in character development. I've got a number of degrees in psychology, theology, philosophy, and my passion is human character development, which I got a doctorate in Rome on, papal teaching with respect to the formation of character. And so that was very transforming. And so for a while, I felt a mission, as Pius XI used to say, it was very important that parents educate their children and that we have clear principles for character formation within the church. And so at the time I felt a certain calling for a family institute, but then it morphed into men's ministry. And so it's very important for me to help men find their place. You know, it's no surprise to all of us that's becoming more and more of a concern. And I say that especially too when we look at men in their 20s. You know, most of them are lost, they're very unnavigated, and they're raised so much in an egalitarian world now, they fail to understand their place and their position. The majority of young men in their early 20s, as I could tell, have no real aspiration to get married, which is a great crisis. They may have aspirations to have sex, but they don't have aspirations to get married and have a family. Okay, so that's very serious. But one of the things I'm developing now in my work is more and more of this concept, and I was challenged by this college professor about 3 years ago, to develop something a little more what's akin to what he would otherwise want me to call a Catholic patriarchy. Because I think what's happening is that even in the majority of good Catholic men, they get stuck in just thinking of themselves as fathers. What do I mean by that? I think it's more important that we frame our mindset to be patriarchs, which is a step above fatherhood. So what happens is, I'm very concerned in the Catholic Church, because if there's just talk of fatherhood, then it's just about one's family. And as the saying often goes, well, my job is to get me and my family to heaven. So it becomes a self-protected, insular ghetto kind of world for the average man in raising his family in the faith, as opposed to a patriarch who understands he has a leadership role, not just in the family, but the community, the church, and the society at large. And so my thinking is, too, if a man doesn't rise to that concept of patriarchy, then he doesn't really understand that it's his place to make a difference in the world. I really believe if 10% of Catholic men got involved in the abortion fight, we can't eradicate it. but it's very, very difficult to get good, conscientious Catholic men out there in front of an abortion clinic, or treating, the situations of their school boards or their local civic meetings and whatnot. So we're finding, the sad thing is, it's women who are taking these roles now, which we men should be assuming them for the protection of our societies and our communities and whatnot. And so I'm very, very concerned that men aren't standing up. And I find that word patriarchy is somewhat emboldens. Patria and arche. The patria, we have the father in there, but the arche means the leader, the principal, and the foundation. And so it's a stronger, more robust word.
Yeah, and a lot of what you're talking about, God Squad, we saw as 25 years ago as police officers on the street, and that's why we started the men's ministry of doing conferences and challenging men. But you're talking about language that aren't we supposed to be ripping down the patriarchy? And
Great question. Do you realize, from what I can tell,
yeah,
patriarchy or patriarch, but definitely patriarchy, that substantive sounds very threatening. One of the difficulties is I see this, is that patriarchy is probably the most hated word in the English language.
Yes.
Now, I did some research recently. I have book covers, get this, where there are I have 12 book covers where in the title or subtitle says Hex the Patriarchy. So witchcraft wants to take out this term. Okay, it's very important to witches that they take it out. And of course, they hate fatherhood, and they hate fatherly leaders. They hate fatherly principles. They hate fatherly, guides and men who stand up. And so, if witchcraft, if the devil hates it the most, then guess what? We have to start lifting up, right?
Amen, brother.
I think it's just that simple. But what I find is, to my shock, it wasn't until about 3 years ago I started working with college-age guys. Usually most of my ministry has been to middle-aged guys. But I started talking to college-age guys and even high school young boys, and they come alive when I talk about the patriarchy. For the specific reason, it finally gives them a certain identity and something to aim for. You just can't say, hey, we're all called to go to heaven someday, and so make sure you go to confession and read your catechism and just be a good boy and study virtue. That's a big thing today. Not that I'm against that necessarily, but I find those movements highly lacking because we don't embrace the patriarchal role, which in some way is to be a leader, a protector, and a provider. And men need to see themselves as arches in those roles. And this is what women want too. They want strong leaders, despite some saying otherwise. Deep down, women, especially if they're in a relationship, want a strong leader, a strong protector, and a strong provider. Deep down, that's exactly what they want.
Well, and yes, and I know so many beautiful young women that are there waiting for these men, and you see them. They're volunteering at the churches. They're involved in CCO or Focus, or because they want those kind of men. And we've been trying to reach down and encourage, especially the young men, because like you say, we don't want a bunch of gray-haired guys like myself saying, I wish I'd done this.
Yeah.
We want young men saying, this is what I'm going to do. Exactly. And we've engaged in different types of ministry, barbecue outreach. And I worked with youth at risk through the police service for 10 years. And just giving them those opportunities to work on a barbecue or do something, be part of something. That's all they want, is that invitation. And unfortunately, we're too afraid to invite people to. That's
true. And they want an invitation to something high and something noble. Yes. They just don't want an invitation as to a means to go to heaven someday. That doesn't mean anything to your average young man. It just doesn't. No. It's got to be something about a combat, about a battle, about a mission to be upheld and lived. And so the more we can make that more compelling and rich and substantive, the more I think more young men will come alive. So yeah, I've very grave concerns about the condition of the average Catholic man. And I'll tell you why. I was counseling. There's a gal I know. In fact, I used to carry her in my arms when I was a young man, somewhat related to me, but through a family I know. And she and I sat down for coffee not too long ago, and she's 27. She says, I don't see myself ever marrying a Catholic man. As a devout Catholic woman. Because she cannot find a good Catholic man. She believes she must go into the secular realm to find somebody manly. And she's not looking for devotion. She's looking for manliness. Yep. Women will choose manliness over some devout Catholic man any day, for the most part.
And that's where you try to figure out why they go with the bad boys.
Exactly.
The bikers, and you're going, why do they have women with them when there's all these good guys out there? Because they don't know how to show that manliness in a loving way.
Exactly.
And that's where we're trying different outreaches up here. This year we're going to try and engage the young men. I don't know if you've heard of disc golf. It's huge, especially amongst young men. Like if you go out on the courses, 80% of the people playing are young men.
Okay.
So we figured meet them where they're at. Then we're getting some discs made up with Terror of Demons, Mirror of Patience, and support and difficulties. So
let me amp this up a bit, Sean. You're Irish, right?
Irish history, absolutely.
Okay, well, we need to start establishing what was the wisdom of the Irish in years past. The wisdom was one of the ways they got so many good vocations and built stout and robust men is because they were all boxing in basements and in the seminaries. In my opinion, which I don't hold as just a mild opinion or something, I hold this to be true opinion. If we can introduce boxing into our parishes and the seminaries today, that would be the one pragmatic thing we can do to actually restore Catholic manhood in the church. Then I have
you and I might have to sit down and have a long discussion, because I think I see a lot of stuff that we can do together with the experience that I've had working with youth at risk. I work in high schools right now with, I've got 3 high schools.
Wow.
And trying to find different ways I'm the police officer in 3 high schools. So you can imagine the stuff that goes on.
Yeah.
And luckily I'm in 3 Catholic high schools, so I'm able to incorporate the faith component when I'm dealing with the young men.
Okay.
I don't have to hold my tongue, as it were.
Sure.
And like some of them, I have them, okay, I can give you this $250 ticket for fighting, or you can work on one of these programs on heroic men and come talk to me about it.
Why don't you set up a ring for them to take out their frustrations? Make sure they have mouthpieces. That's all they need. Gloves and mouthpieces.
You are speaking.
And by the way, let's be very, very clear about this. When I explain this to young women, they say yes, yes, yes. When I speak about this to priests, they say no, no, no. You decide. And by the way, we're talking about the secret of the Irish on how they populated this world with priests. My theory, it's all started to diminish once they took boxing out of the basements of churches and the seminaries.
There you go. And my granddad, who was, he was in Glasgow, but he fought in the Irish Army. And that was one of the things he did, was he was a boxing champion in the Army with the Canadian forces till he came back. Because it had a bad outcome at one of his bouts where he allegedly disabled a man so badly that he quit boxing after that. But it was like my dad growing up, if he came home to say that he lost, like he got in a fight, and the only question was, did you win? And if you didn't, get back out there till you do.
Yeah. Hey, I'm not saying there were some extremes and approaches, okay?
Yeah.
But the incorporation of it helped men become men.
Well, and that's where,
The problem is with most young men and most men today, they can't take a hit. They
well,
can't take one in the face. Sorry, they can't.
and that's showing itself in all kinds of aspects in
I think
life
that's right.
where, like, I see it even in young police officers. They've never really been in a fight in their entire life, where that until they get in one, and it's stretching them, right?
Yeah,
Whereas you and I probably got involved in one or two school fights growing up,
exactly. Yeah.
and I've coached rugby
Oh, that's cool.
off and on for a number of years because I think it's the ultimate sport for
I do
for
too. In terms of a team sport and formation and the visceral development in it, yeah, it's a
yeah,
superior sport. Yeah, all men should be playing rugby.
because
All men should be boxing.
it's like you hear a lot of swearing and stuff in different sports, and whereas my guys, if you swore, you're doing push-ups, sit-ups, whatever, because I say if you can't control your tongue, how are you going to control your play on the field and not take stupid penalties and all this other stuff? So
Right.
it's that character development that you're talking about,
Yeah.
that manliness, that warrior. Like police officers, we very much get into that warrior mentality.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I just think it's very important preparation. I mean, let's be honest. Till about 150, 200 years ago, every man knew how to wield a sword or a stick to death. You know, I mean,
yeah,
men used to be men, and the combat arts are, I believe, the most formative, for the best formative avenue for character development there is. Far
and
more than sports, far more than rugby. A man's got to stand in the ring, and he's got to stand alone. And he's got to be willing to take it in the face. He's got to be willing to take one in the face and not fear it coming. And this is the problem. Men don't want to stand alone. They want to be alone. They don't want to. They don't want to face the music on their own, and that makes us less of men.
well, and that's where the question of where to dive in. I don't know if you've read any of Dr. Leonard Sachs, where he talks about Boys Adrift and stuff.
Okay,
Where
I've got
this
a book that says, yeah.
the epidemic of boys living in their basement, mama's basement, and where the women are now taking many of the careers, whether it's lawyer, doctor, or stuff, and the young men are just dropping out of university.
Yeah, they're working at
On
Starbucks and Pizza Hut. Yeah,
yeah,
and the women are in law offices. Yeah, I know the story.
so where to dive in, and that's been one of the great questions. Do you deal with the dads? Do you deal with the catch the boys when they're younger? Do you reach out to them in their early 20s? Like where's the jump in point
That's a
to
good point. That's a good point. And yeah, where do you start with all this? Well, I think one of the things I'm finding when I'm starting to reach out more to guys who are, let's just say, between the ages of 28 to 42. Usually, most of my mystery to be used to get a guys a little bit older, but a guy 28 to 42, he wants he wants some development, and he's hungry for it, and he wants some solid Catholic teaching behind it. So, and there's something about the 50, 60, 80-year plan, I think, to bringing the church back, is that I don't think we can reform the seminaries or the clergy. It's got to be done through young fathers forming their boys who enter the seminaries and make a transformation in the church. But I mean, but we need to deal with these at all levels. But the most important, one of the vital elements here, though, Sean, be very clear. In all of these, even some of what are considered very good seminaries, they may talk a lot about character formation, but they never define the character they want to form. Nor do they ever go into the particulars of how they're to form a certain vision that they have. None of them have it. None. And so there's no existing, how would I say, proposal out there on what it means to form a man in a priest. That, I believe, is one of the greatest crises in the church. Okay, there's just a lot of virtue talk and prayer talk and all the rest. But there's no solid vision of manliness given to the priest. And it's going to be otherwise very difficult if that's not in the seminaries and the priests are forming. They're not going to see that vision or that dynamic as what they should be forming in men in their parishes. And so this is one of the reasons why I think the seminaries are gravely lacking. They have no vision of what it is to form a man and a priest. At least if they had it, it should be enunciated and spelled out, and it's not anywhere.
Well, I'll talk to Father Cristino, our youth. He's our diocesan formation director for young priests. So,
Good.
and he's also started the St. Francis Xavier chaplaincy program, just to try and reach young people as a whole, creating that window to be part of the church for those young professionals or university students, so they feel that they're welcome and it's their community. So he's trying to do some stuff up here that I think is really good. And
Is he forming the men and women together, or is he taking the men on their own and forming them?
the men on their own and forming them. So he's got a different formation for the men, and the chaplaincy is just a component of trying to engage younger people, because you want to invite the young men to participate. And that's where I'm not knocking the ladies serving in the church. They do a great job, but we need men to step up so young men can see them. Like, our altar servers in many churches are all females, because
I get it.
we need that example. Young men want to be with older men, and they want to learn how to do things. And
And they want to work. They want to work with men only.
Yeah.
And so when you lose that dynamic of what it is to galvanize the men together, you've kind of lost that battle. Once you make, we got to remember the young men today are embraced in a kind of environment of androgyny. It's men and women always together. And most young men can't even see the differences between the two. And very offensive if you ever bring that subject up.
Well, and that goes back to that point of that tearing down of the patriarchy, that some organizations, that's their sole goal, right? And they use it with different titles, and it very much has infiltrated much of our schools, where Dr. Leonard Sachs talks about where boys will draw a picture of a war and guys shooting each other, but Sally drew a really nice picture of all these animals with great colors, and why can't you be more like Sally?
Yeah.
And where they're wired for the most part differently. Like my grandsons, they came out of the womb wrestling, I think. Like you'd like to see my grandsons in action. So
good. Never take their weapons away.
Well,
everyone has Second Amendment right, as we say here in the States, even a young boy.
Yeah, we're in Canada. We don't have the Second Amendment right. So, but I digress. That's it's something that goes back to that character, that responsibility, that duty that you talk about. So, and that's building it. I'm going to pull it down just a second.
Oh, nice. Is that a gladius? It's a gladius, isn't it?
So this was a commemorative sword for the 125th police fire in Calgary. So, but when it showed up, I wanted to strap it onto my belt. I'm not lying, and go work the street with the sword, because it's a cool thing to have. And my son's taking a drama program where he's actually learned sword fighting. So,
no, that's good. Sword fighting is actually something primal in a man's nature. And one of the things that's fascinating about sword fighting, if you fence for 30 minutes 3 times a week, you will live into your 90s. There's something about the perfection of wielding a sword that keeps one in the best shape ever. I'm not sure if you've ever fought with a sword. I have. I've used French foil. And
oh, really?
barely learned medieval longsword. It's the most grueling and the most exhausting thing you could ever do. Oh yeah, so the art of sword fighting, I think, has many good objectives. One learns strategy, and again, I think it's very primal to learn how to use a sword. But at the same time, it is a superior form of exercise.
I might have to try that after I've taken up the disc golf, because of the challenge of walking, and they're, some of them are pretty good terrains that you're in. So and that's the thing, is finding what I call the hook. So
Yeah.
working with young men, what's their hook? Is it basketball? Is it football? Is it chess? What is the hook for you to engage that young person?
It's simple. I
And
can tell you how to fill a basketball stadium in no time. All you have to do is get two priests duking it out with boxing gloves. Every man will show up.
oh,
That's
I
serious.
have no doubt about that.
So if you want to make a difference in these men's lives, you get some priests who have a little moxie in them to put on some gloves and a mouthpiece and get out there, sell tickets for $10 a piece, make some money while you're at it, and actually entertain these guys.
All right, I will
It'd be
keep
difficult
that.
to find two priests to do that. I get that, but
Yeah.
that'll
So,
get them
well,
there.
I've got a couple of guys in mind that might be open to it. So,
You watch. You'll fill us. Well, you'll fill a complete basketball
yeah.
court.
Well, I'm hoping to do the chief superintendent for the Catholic School Board soon. I'll run some of these ideas past them and
Uh-oh.
see how well they hold. So,
Will those fly? Yeah.
yeah, because I'd gladly do some of this stuff. I've talked about it. Rather than them having the battles out in the parking lot where they bring other friends, and nobody nobody fights man to man anymore. Like, it's not, it's I'll get my four friends when you're by yourself.
Yeah.
Like, it's this gang mentality versus, it's never one on one.
Yeah.
It's never that man on man, because they're too afraid, is what it is. They're afraid
right.
of their limitations, or they're afraid. It's fear is the big thing
I think you're right.
that a lot of these young men are dealing with.
That's right. In the natural order, a man overcomes fear by engaging those things which he develops a certain courage through. And a boxing glove is one of the best things to conquer that natural fear of physical contact. I know of no better.
Wow. All right. I've got some food for thought. Speaking of food,
Sounds good.
is there, like, we talk about faith, family, food, and fun here. So is there a dish that is your favorite to prepare? Or
You know, it's interesting. I make a certain chicken soup where I throw the bones back in, so I make a very rich bone broth. And I even throw chicken feet in there and boil that up. And yeah, so I make a very rich chicken bone broth. And I find that for myself, it's the most healthiest thing I've found myself to eat. I feel the best after I eat that.
there you go.
Yeah.
And it's one of those ancient cures that seems to help the common cold
Right.
and everything else, right?
I think you're right.
So one of the segments is, as we've talked about the young men struggling, what advice do you give your 18-year-old self?
Your 18-year-old self. Wow. You know, do things which are maybe adventurous. So I mean, some men, especially if they're not led, right? They need to start engaging in things which lead them to some kind of venture, because adventure will help grow in courage. So one of the problems is all men, you know, they need to be, well, they need to get away from all their devices, right? And they need to be out there in nature, but they need to start doing adventurous things. Now, of course, I'm really big for the martial arts. I mean, anything is better than nothing. However, of course, I'm not really for men sparring with women, and that's very hard to find. That's one of the reasons why boxing is a superior sport, because a lot of boxing clubs, usually you'll find for the most part, are just men. It's one of the reasons why I advocate them instead of Eastern martial arts and whatnot. But boys need to start getting engaged in rough things which are rough, things which are rugged. So any kind of climbing activities, anything which involves a certain rigor, physicality. You know, men, I think, you know, I mean, young men too, you know, there's no reason why they can't be involved, you know, in certain things like basketball, or, you know, engaging in some of these adult leagues of flag football or whatnot. But I believe A man can never come into his own, especially a young man, unless he is not working his body well. Because you cannot have a well-adjusted, well-integrated man of spirit and soul unless his body is not integrating that. It does not happen. And if it does, the man will be dissociated in things of soul and things of body. In other words, they won't mutually connect. Okay, so this is why it's very important when training a young man too and leading him to Christ. You must integrate physical activities as well. Yeah, I'm very, very big on that. And of course, I would imagine too, for centuries in Europe, we had what was called the flos duellatorum, the flowering of the burgeoning of battle, where boys, as they were raised in the church and whatnot during the early Middle Ages and beyond, they went through rigorous training. And, first they was boys, they were wrestling, and then they were boxing, and then they used, many of different types of arms and whatnot. So martial arts development should be something a little more sophisticated. And because there's so many things that help develop a boy. I mean, he needs to learn how to wrestle, he needs to learn how to box, he needs to understand projectiles, he needs to understand how to learn a sword. Every young man has a desire to learn all these things, everyone. And so it's incumbent upon us to train him in that. If anything, for his dexterity and his skill, helps him to go in courage. And I'm sure what would happen in the Flos Duellatorum, I've never seen any manuals on this, but boys were actually taught the principles of the faith through the boxing glove, through the wrestling, through the sword, especially through the sword, right? And that's one of the reasons why St. Paul uses that kind of imagery. He knows it's important to use images of war when teaching men. He gets that. And that's why it's very vital for us today to do that. But also, too, let me to add, I think it's very important, is that we must do what Jesus did. Jesus never addressed men and women together. He addressed men, and women were present, okay, and they heard. That's when we hear of speaking crowds, they talk about the 5,000 men or the 7,000 or whatnot. If priests, again, aren't addressing men directly like Christ did, we can't win our church back. It's not going to happen. And we've bought into this androgynous style of teaching in the churches, of where all the homilies, all the lessons, all the spirituality is in some mixed androgynous modality, and it always defaults into something feminine.
Well, and that's interesting, because when we were first trying to get permission to do our first God Squad men's conference, because nothing like that had ever been done. We're talking 1998, and even today, I phoned around to diocese about men's ministry, and it's like I'm speaking a foreign language.
Yeah.
But the one priest that spoke up at the priest council was, and he talked about we need this to curb the feminization of the church, because it's very much what you talk about, and that's the whole world right now, right?
Yeah.
Is we need to create feminized boys.
Yeah.
But that's not what the women are looking for.
That's right.
When they're looking for a mate, right? They're looking. So one of the other segments that I do is Jeff Cavins talks about riding with your posse, your go-to saints. Who are the saints that mean the most to you, or what you walk with?
That's a good question. I dedicate most of my men's ministry to Padre Pio. I had the fortune of being in his canonization and his beatification in Rome, so that was pretty profound. Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe I have so many patrons, and I think it is very important. It's interesting too. Okay, now the feminine side of me is coming out. Okay, I have this devotion to Saint Teresa of Lisieux, or rather, I would like to think otherwise. She has a devotion to me, because she keeps showing up in my life. Now, one of the things I do that in some way I try to teach men is that, whenever I mess up, Sean, in kind of like relationship, or I get myself in a bind, if I try to fix it, it's just going to make things worse. I just say, Saint Therese, you got to handle this. You got to take care of it. All the more so if it's an issue with a woman, okay? Saint Therese, this is in your hands. I surrender it to you, and I trust that you will take care of it, and I let it go. The burden of my heart, I take it away, not that I want to dismiss it, but it's important to consecrate and dedicate certain avenues of one's life and bearing, to the saints in that way. So every man needs to dedicate his household to the guardian angel of his household. We too need to be saying saints. I close my rosary always invoking, the angel of the United States. And of course, it's very, very important because we need to be invoking the intercession of these saints and these angels, especially all the more so for which domain they already have. And so it's very important if a man's in communications, that he dedicate everything he does to Maximilian Kolbe or who's the other one? Francis de Sales, who's I think another patron of communications. So it's very important too, but it's important too, not that we see the saints as people who help us out and meet our needs and help us gain some freaking flyer miles. We must always see the saints in light of a relationship we have with them. Otherwise, we can use our faith in too much of a self-absorbed way, and that I don't think is ever pleasing to God. And so I think in general, in the spiritual life, we need to invoke God in the things of God, not for ourselves, but always so that we can look more like him and others can be transformed in him. Sometimes in our faith, we make it so much about ourselves and how God and his saints and all the rest, Blessed Mother, can benefit us, rather than how can we be transformed in Christ to be the light of the world instead of having our needs met. So as much as I may talk about having the needs met in the saints, I think it's important that we invoke that. It should always be in light of an intimate relationship that we have with these saints. It should all come down to that intimacy and relationship.
Amen to that. That one of the things that I read a few years ago that just really stuck with me is as you can tell, St. Joseph's a big guy here in my house, and
patron of Canada, right?
Yeah. So being the apparition of St. Joseph is my guy, and as telling Father Jonathan, St. Michael's another big one because he's patron saint of police officers. So
that's right.
So
I've heard that.
Yeah. So just walking with them, and they're not there, like you say, to serve you. It sounds like you need a little bit of your Jim Beam. So I don't know if you know, but the Gaelic word for whiskey, the origin of whiskey is called Ishkabaha, which means water of life. And my prayer is that you continue to lead many souls to the true water of life.
Well,
and I want to thank you for taking time out of your day.
Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed this. Appreciate it very much.
And I will stop the recording. I hope you are enjoying this content. Please like and subscribe, share with a friend. Also, go to godsquad.ca where you can pray with us and for us, and consider donating so that we can continue our mission, reaching men wherever they're at.